Support for First Coast Connect is provided in part by Baptist Health and North Florida TPO.
Good morning. I'm Ann Schindler, and this is First Coast Connect. Today, with Florida about to break a record on state-sponsored killings, faith leaders demand an end to executions. We ask the Bishop Emeritus of the Diocese of St. Augustine about Governor Ron DeSantis' spate of execution orders. Later in the program, Black history and creative programming form the backdrop at Lift Every Voice and Sing Park. We talk to organizers behind the Vibrant Places Collective about what's coming to the city's newest downtown destination. But first, Florida is on pace to execute more men this year than ever in state history. It's a push and a policy opposed by Bishop Emeritus Felipe Estévez of St. Augustine. And he joins me now. Good morning, Bishop Estévez.
Good morning, Anne. So glad to be here with Kathleen Bach, our Director of Communications.
Thank you so much. And as you point out, we are also joined by Kathleen Bagg, Director of Communications at the Diocese of St. Augustine. Good morning, Kathleen.
Good morning, Anne.
Bishop Estévez, you retired in 2021 as the primary bishop of the
2022, Anne.
Okay, 2022. You are led the Jacksonville-based Diocese of St. Augustine. But the issue of the death penalty is not something that you came to in retirement. This is an issue that's been important to you for a long time.
Yes, absolutely. Death penalty is not necessary. Death penalty is inadmissible. I know the sensitivity of the governor for the victims and the crimes committed. I think that all of us need to be sensitive to those victims and families who have experienced crime. And we don't need crime, and it shouldn't be. But looking at the criminal is also a child of God who perhaps had a difficult childhood. As a poet has said, the child is the father of man. I would say the child is the father and mother of the human person. But perhaps those criminals have had a very difficult childhood of abuse, of violence, and somehow that has been reactivated. But he remains, the one who has committed crimes remains a child of God.
I'm curious about the argument that you make. I mean, you've written letters to the editor here at the Florida Times-Union. You've gone to rallies. Just yesterday, faith leaders, protested this kind of recent spate of executions, as we noted, were on pace to break Florida's record. But you're talking about, sympathy or empathy for somebody who's committed a terrible crime. And I wonder if you think that that really is the strongest case to make. A lot of people just, perhaps not from a religious background, really don't care if somebody, had a bad childhood because of the crimes that they've committed. And I think that our governor, who has described some of these terrible sadistic things that occurred, might also align with somebody that isn't really interested in making a case for mercy.
Well, we need mercy. In order to have peace in our society, and all of us, we want peace. In order to have peace, we have to have mercy. True. Peace comes with justice. That's why we talk about justice and peace. But peace, justice, and mercy, we need that trilogy. And we need to be merciful because violence engenders violence. We don't want violence in the state of Florida. We want peace and we want mercy. And we want people like Pope Leo XIV says, we need to build bridges, not polarization. We need to end polarization, and we need to build bridges. And I think that the death penalty should not happen in the state of Florida because it's violent, and it's not necessary. I bet you, Anne, that there will not be a prisoner in death row who could leave death row. That will not happen because there are so many protections in our prisons that there will not be a prisoner who will get out. No, it will never get out the way our prisons are built. every citizen in Florida is highly secured and need not to be afraid of the incarcerated, because the incarcerated are there for good.
And you would know that because you have a death row ministry that you have, conducted over a period of years. You visit with people who are on death row. It is a secure environment.
And as a retired, I continue to go, and I continue to go because Jesus said, "I was in prison and you visited me." So visiting the prisoner is a blessing from Jesus Christ.
How relevant is it that, in the story of Christianity that Jesus was executed when it comes to your feelings or the Catholic Church's in particular feelings about death penalty?
Yeah, a cardinal in Madrid said, "My Savior was a prisoner." And Maximilian Kolbe, they were going to execute a prisoner, and Maximilian Kolbe said, take me, I want to," because he has a family, and he needs to get back to his family eventually.
Is this a kind of in the Holocaust setting?
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Okay.
Maximilian Kolbe, who was a prisoner and was killed so that the one who was supposed to be killed would not be killed and return to his family. Because Maximilian Kolbe, like I am, we are celibate. We don't have my family is my parents, my sister, and my brother, but I haven't engendered children. I am a celibate for the kingdom, to serve the community and to care for the community of faith.
Yeah. Kathleen, you have, as we were talking about before the program started, you have served under 4 bishops at the Diocese of St. Augustine. And I imagine that they have all been very different and unique in their
Oh, absolutely.
in their own ways. But the opposition to the death penalty has been a fairly consistent policy of this diocese. Is that right?
That's right. Our diocese being located in the northern part of Florida, we have 6 other dioceses. So a lot comes to this diocese in terms of providing pastoral care to people on death row as well as in prisons. And they've
that's
taken
because
that lead.
This area has a lot
Yes.
of both. Is that? I mean, we've got death row in this.
We have death row, but we got a ton of prisons if you look at North Florida especially.
Mhm.
And so a lot of people that are incarcerated may be from South Florida. So we take care of all of the inmates and those on death row in terms of pastoral care.
And so this recent, pace of executions surpasses what we've seen in the past.
Oh, I haven't seen anything like it. I really haven't.
8 prisoners have been killed already in 2025. 8 prisoners.
So I think my count right now is that there have been 9 death warrants signed, but I think we're on number 7.
July 15th would be the 9th. The 9th to be executed.
Okay.
Imagine
that doesn't
9
actually accord with
prisoners
my own.
die.
I think that the Michael Bell is scheduled to be
Uh-huh.
executed on the 15th, but I
Yeah.
think that there's been a death warrant signed since then.
Okay, that could be on
yeah.
the death warrant.
At the
regardless.
end of July 30 after a while.
Will be the
Another one.
So yes, regardless, that's more than we've seen in any other administration, any other governor.
That's true.
I would say in the whole United States, there is not a state in our country that has that record. This is awful. This is violent. And that needs to stop.
If you're just joining us, we are talking to Bishop Emeritus Felipe Estévez of St. Augustine and also Kathleen Bagg of the Diocese of St. Augustine about the pace of executions here in Florida. If you have comments or questions or want to join the conversation, please give us a call at 904-549-2937. You can also email firstcoastconnect@wjct.org, or you can reach out on social media, Facebook, Instagram, or X at FCC On Air. Now, as we mentioned, the governor has, been a strong defendant of the death penalty and also his decision to issue as many death warrants as he has. I just want to take a listen to some of what he had to say recently on this issue.
I support capital punishment because I think there are some crimes that are just so horrific, the only appropriate punishment is the death penalty. And I want to have process, and the courts don't always get it right. And if someone is wrongfully convicted, you want there to be a backstop for sure. But man, there's just always that frustration with waiting.
So there is often a long wait for these executions. But for the people who are on death row, there is a process that happens. And when someone has a death warrant signed, they're usually moved close to the death chamber, as it were, just kind of within a few feet, really, of where they'll meet their fate. And so this process is a clock ticking. What kind of role do you play, or do other faith leaders play when they're ministering to people on death row at a juncture like this?
Well, thank goodness that the state of Florida allows us to be with the prisoner. There was a Catholic prisoner recently, one of the 8, and there will be 10 at the end of July who will be executed. And thank goodness the state of Florida and the officers of these locations, they were extremely kind to me and extremely welcoming to me. And I walk toward the prison. They are in a very special prison, like a cage, very small. In the practice of the Catholic faith, we have an intimate moment where the priest and the penitent can be alone and protected in their privacy. And I regret that while I was having that moment of privacy with the person who was going to die who was going to be killed the following day. And by the way, I was impressed by his serenity. He was very serene and very friendly and very prayerful. He edified me. I must say, I was going to minister to him, and he ministered to me. But anyway, I really object that I didn't have privacy, that the officer stayed listening to what he would say to me and what I would say to him. So in a way, I didn't have the privacy to talk to him alone and without nobody listening, because the officers, who were very kind to me, by the way, I am not saying anything bad about them, because they couldn't be more gentle with me and friendly, but they didn't respect the privacy of the one who the state was going to kill in less than 24 hours, and a bishop who traveled 40 miles to be with him few hours before his killing, and I didn't have privacy, and I regret that.
Do you believe that they were told not to leave you alone, or to?
Well, yeah, I believe that.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
I want to ask you about an email that we got from a gentleman named Ricardo, and he says Bishop Emeritus Estévez has written about the wrongs of the death penalty, but the pro-life movement as a whole is way too quiet. Where are all the pro-life people? The Florida Conference of Catholic Bishops, they send emails, but do they really lobby or speak out to condemn the governor's actions? My church pounded us with anti-Amendment 4 messages. That was the abortion ban amendment, every week at Mass by email and in publications, but barely a peep about the expansion of the death penalty. What do you say to that?
Well, I think that he's accurate because it seems that the pro-life people are more focused on the child and the right of the child to be born and to be protected in the womb of his beloved mother and his beloved father. But I think that the pro-life movement, I agree with the gentleman who wrote that text, because the pro-life movement needs to include the end of life as well. And we need to protect every citizen, including criminals in prison. We need to include every citizen at the end of his life. And a criminal, I understand the governor. By the way, I will not condemn the government. The government, I have a great respect for him, and I voted for him, and I would vote again for him. We have difference of opinions on the position of the incarcerated, He's very sensitive to the crimes, which I recognize, but he needs to be sensitive to all the citizens of Florida, including the incarcerated.
We're talking to Bishop Emeritus Felipe Estévez of the Diocese of St. Augustine, and we are taking your calls and questions. We have a call now from Mark on the west side. Good morning, Mark. Go ahead.
Good morning. This is such a powerful issue. I was born and raised Roman Catholic all my life, and I go back and forth on this all the time. You know, the worst place I think a sane person could think about being is in prison, much less being in prison for years and decades. And I just can't imagine. It would be like a Kafka play. You know, you're just driven slowly insane every day. So if we are fighting against the death penalty and we want the death penalty repealed and say, oh, we got you off, you're just going to serve life in prison, that would be worse than being executed, I think. So aren't you if we did what you want us to do and repeal the death penalty, aren't you contributing to these poor people's suffering?
Thanks, Mark. Your thoughts?
Well, I think Mark's point is a very good point. I hope that the judges don't give such long sentences, and I wish that those who are responsible for our prisons, if a prisoner has converted and the prison is repentant for the damage that he has done to victims and their families, that sentence should be reviewed. The sentences are too long. Pope Francis said that.
I mean, I think we should say in terms of, improving conditions for inmates, whether they're lifers or not, it certainly is not a priority. I mean, the governor just vetoed funding that would have allowed for air conditioning and some, pilot programs in prisons in Florida, would have allowed for, once a month of a free 15-minute phone call to families. So, I mean, there's not a movement, I would say, safe to say, in that direction of either mercy, Kathleen, when it comes to the death penalty, or more merciful conditions in prison.
You don't really see that movement except for some groups that are really dedicated to fighting the issue of the death penalty. But yeah, if you talk to some of the prison ministers that go out there is no air conditioning. Can you imagine in Florida being in a small cell with no windows, no air conditioning?
Well, Bishop Snyder, who visits the prisons monthly,
Mhm.
he could not go in the summer because he just could not stand
That's right.
and he would, for 3 months, he would not visit the prisoners because of the heat.
Wow.
And I think they only get a shower once a week. They get very little time out in the fresh air at all. They're there to be punished for the crimes that they committed. But if you look at the death penalty, the gentleman on the phone was absolutely right. It is very hard to live your life out in those conditions and then not accept the death penalty. But because the death penalty is so final, they don't have a chance to repent. They don't have a chance to be redeemed. Sometimes they're providing ministry to their fellow inmates, the ones that they can talk to.
We really need a culture of rehabilitation in our prisons, not of punishment, but rehabilitation. In other words, to restore their dignity as children of God that they are. Even if they are executed as children of God because God loves them.
We've got a call from Mark on the south side. Good morning, Mark. Go ahead.
Hey, good morning. Personally, I had no problem with the death penalty. I have no problem with sentences of life, that kind of a thing. But a few months ago, I watched a movie about a man in Texas who was wrongly convicted for a murder. He wasn't any kind of a saint prior to this, but he was wrongly convicted for murder, and Texas put him to death. And they proved his innocence shortly after he had passed away. And I went online and I looked at the number of executions across the country, and I don't have them exactly, but it was roughly close to 2,100 executions have happened since the 1970s, early 1970s, I guess it was. And then I looked at how many of them were wrongly executed, where they had been overturned, and it was close to 10%. I know we can't be perfect, but when I looked at that statistic and found that close to 10% of those executed were later proved to be innocent of that particular crime, then it made me think about my support for the death penalty. And I'm sure there are some cases out there where it is a sealed case or a surefire case of someone's guilt. But when there are instances where this individual did not do it, 10% just seems like a horrible statistic for wrongly executing individuals. So I don't know what the answer would be to ensure that those that are put to death have committed those crimes, but an error rate of 10% isn't acceptable to me, and I was a fan of it.
Thanks, Mark, for those thoughts. I mean, there is a timetable built in, Bishop Estévez, that's supposed to allow for convictions. But as we can see, that it doesn't always allow for reversals of any information. And we know that the Florida Supreme Court just yesterday rejected the request for new information to be allowed in the case of the Jacksonville man who is going to be executed next week, Michael Bell. And so some apparent finality as that date moves closer.
Yeah, what the gentleman said just now is one of the risks in opposition that happen with death penalty. Is one of the risks that the person who is being executed, the gentleman gave the percentage of 10% in the whole country. That's a very important date. I wish that Governor DeSantis would be listening to what he said, because that's a very important information.
I want to ask you, because I know in the past you have written about, kind of the death belt, the Bible Belt, as a place where there's a great deal of support for the death penalty. And it's something that you've written about as sort of, in some ways just splitting between, maybe the literalist, people who take a literal interpretation of the Bible and Catholics. It splits religious communities. What is it that it is happening there when you're between religious communities, conservative religious communities, and then Catholics on the death penalty? Because very often, conservative Christian groups generally tend to skew a little bit more in support of the death penalty.
You are absolutely, Ann Schindler. You are absolutely right, and that causes me great pain and sadness that my faith community is not unanimous and is not putting the pressure that is needed to the governor, to the officials of the state of Florida, to stop this nonsense of death penalty, of killing prisoners. We need to put a stop. There will be 10, and we are half of the year of 2025, and there will be 10 killed, unnecessary. There is no need. They could be in the prison. We don't need to kill them.
But in terms of even the Catholic community, I think we skew pretty much what the national average is in terms of acceptance of the death penalty. So even within the Catholic Church, we're trying to do a lot more formation and education about the issue. Sometimes when we talk about it costs more to put somebody to death than it does to let them stay in prison for life.
So there is an economic dimension to that.
There's the economic, but it's just a matter of changing hearts. And I think we need to do a better job. And I think that's what Bishop Estévez and a lot of the people in our prison ministry are trying to do, is to bring people into the ministry as well as go out to the parishes and really talk about the issue. But being in the Bible Belt, I would agree with you that we are probably skewed similar to those that take the Bible literally.
Right. And we should say that is kind of the argument that people often fall back on, is the idea that this is in Scripture, it's in Genesis. There is.
Yeah, but wait a second, because we have in a Scripture the example of Jesus, who at the cross said, "Forgive them, Father. They don't know what they are doing." And look, Jesus with his hands, his hands and his feet, with the hurt that he was experienced, with the pain that he was experienced, and he was saying, "Forgive them, Father." We need forgiveness. We need mercy, because Jesus said it at the cross. "Forgive them, Father. They don't know what they are doing."
We have a call from Joe in Jacksonville. Good morning, Joe. Go ahead.
Hi, good morning. This question is for the bishop. So I am wondering, if the country that decides to execute a prisoner, whose conscience does that fall on? Does that fall on the people of the government? Does it fall on the government itself? Or does it perhaps fall on the executor, the person who actually executes the prisoner? Thank you.
Well, this is an excellent question. And by the way, I would say to your question, forgive them, forgive whoever is responsible. And in fact, all the citizens of Florida, we are responsible. Because when a prisoner is executed, we, the citizens of Florida, it's the state of Florida, it's us, all the citizens of Florida who are executing. So I would not put it in terms of singling out the responsibility. I would say the responsibility is all of us. And Chandler, thank you for bringing this conversation to our listeners.
I do want to ask, very often victims' families don't take this message well of mercy because it's very hard to understand what they've been through and then the grief and the suffering that they've endured. But I think it's worth pointing out that the Catholic Church and the Diocese of St. Augustine itself went through a very violent crime committed against a priest who was murdered.
Father Rene.
Father Rene. In 2016, he was carjacked and locked in a trunk and ultimately murdered by a drug addict that he had tried to help. But there was a fascinating codicil to that crime because he had signed this commitment earlier in his life, a declaration of life. Can you explain kind of what that said and how that impacted the outcome of the case? Because I think it's worth people realizing that there is something close to home that the diocese experienced.
Thank you for the question. And yes, Father Rene, regretfully, he was visiting the prisons, and one of those prisoners came out and killed him in Georgia, and he dropped him in Georgia. And thank goodness Father Rene had written in his will where he says, if I am being killed, please don't kill the one who killed me. And the fact that it was his will, even though Georgia, the state of Georgia, was considering the death penalty to that person who killed a priest, we went to Georgia. I went as a bishop of St. Augustine, and Archbishop Gregory at that time was the Archbishop of Atlanta. Later, he became a cardinal, and he just retired from Washington, D.C., Archbishop Gregory. And so Archbishop Gregory was with me, and we both pleaded to the state of Georgia, please don't kill the person who killed Father Rene, because Father Rene would not want that. And he wrote that in his will.
It's sort of extraordinary, Kathleen, that he would have even thought at any point in his life to say, if I'm ever a victim of a violent crime, I don't want the perpetrator killed in my name.
He was at a conference where they were discussing the death penalty and some of the ministry that goes on with it. And they had that declaration at the conference. And so he signed that, and he made sure that made it into his personnel file so that if anything did happen, I mean, I think it was kind of providential in a way, but I think that was a great example of somebody who had been murdered, but gave forgiveness and mercy to the person who murdered him.
Well, it is an important conversation. Thank you so much for being here. Bishop Estévez, Kathleen Bagg, really appreciate it.
And Chandler, thank you for bringing this conversation to our public, because we are in great, great need, as 10 prisoners have been killed in the 2025, to put a stop to this madness.
Yeah. Thank you, Ann.
Thank you. Certainly on pace. All right. Up next, we'll talk to the creative minds shaping the art and culture programming at Lift Every Voice and Sing Park. Welcome back. Well, creating the city's newest downtown park took a long time, but the people organizing the activities have wasted no time coming up with a plan to activate that space. Here to tell us about the historical and creative backdrop behind Lift Every Voice and Sing Park is Lloyd Washington, president of the Durkeeville Historical Society and the park's original and longtime champion. Welcome back, Lloyd.
Good morning. How are you?
Nice to see you.
All right.
We're also joined by artist Erin Kendrick. She's the designer of the park's historic markers and an extraordinary artist here in Jacksonville. Welcome, Erin. Welcome back, I should say. Mariano Mendez, he's a third-generation tailor and legacy business owner from LaVilla. Good morning, Mariano.
Good morning.
And Carla Michelle Jones. She's a facilitator with the Vibrant Places Collective and a familiar face in the world of local social media. Welcome.
Welcome. Well, thank you.
Thank you for being here. So, Lloyd Washington, it has been a slow road to get here, as we have discussed in the past. This park was dedicated back in 2015, and for a long, long time, it just remained a grass lot. And we are really at a different point now.
We're I'm glad to be at that point, to be honest with you, because 12 years ago when we started, it was interesting. The first thing we had to do was find out where the park was, where the place, the actual place. And with the help of former Councilman Warren Jones and Lisa Ransom. Lisa at that time was a city planner, and she was an avid fan of James Weldon Johnson. So she found a place. So she helped out a great deal. So it's been a learning and a long coming process. And the thing that really got me started was I was standing in the Durkeeville Historical Society one day, and I looked up, and there's an exhibit for John Roseman Johnson. And I turned around, and Dr. Williams was there, my predecessor, and I said, who is this guy? And that started my interest into learning who John Roseman was.
And for those who are still not familiar with James Weldon and his brother, John Roseman Johnson, remind us about their role in creating the Lift Every Voice and Sing anthem.
The anthem, James Weldon wrote the poem. The music, it was put to music by John Roseman. And it sat idle for a long time, but until it became a musical piece, that's when it really took off.
And Carla, the history of this place is interwoven with the story of James Weldon and John Roseman Johnson, because it's either located on or very close to where they lived. Is that right?
Absolutely. It's the former home site. Their father actually built the home. It was a 2-story home on that block. They also had rental properties on that lot. And what I was fortunate to learn as well through Mr. Lloyd's urging is that Jay Roseman converted a living room in that home into a home studio to create that music. So we're fascinated to learn those things and then be a part of the actual build of the park.
And Erin, you helped design the historical markers at this park, but overall, kind of the design and the visioning of this park was a very, thorough and well thought out process. Can you sort of describe the elements of the park and what the goal was, what y'all were trying to achieve in terms of inviting the community in and sharing the story of that place?
Well, we really wanted to galvanize a lot of things into one space. We wanted it to be a place that people could gather. We wanted it to be a place to remind people of the history there. We wanted it to be a place where people can learn about the history. I want you to make sure I give the correct name of the company who actually did the design of the park.
Designer Walter Hood Design Studios.
And so we came into the fold when just dealing with the design of the markers and how the markers would be added into the space, and really trying to make it clear to folks about all the different elements in the park, because a lot of people do assume that the shotgun house that's there would have been the Johnson brothers' home, and that's not correct. The home was actually in a different area of the park. So the markers help, tell that story explicitly of like why the shotgun house is there, the history of the shotgun house. The markers that are in the park tell the story of the Johnson family, tell the story of the song. So it just really offers anyone who comes through the park at any point in time a place to really kind of like reflect on who these people were, on what their contributions were, and really feel like they have a place that's really like their own.
And Mariano, this place, commemorates a history. She mentioned the shotgun home that is restored and on the site of the park. There used to be a lot of those in LaVilla. There used to be a lot of other buildings in LaVilla. Much of that was destroyed in the name of urban renewal in the 90s. But your family really has this legacy claim to a business that began there. Your grandfather
Grandfather.
began it, a tailoring business, and you continue it to this day, although it has relocated.
Yes. Yeah, I'm on Atlantic Boulevard, but yeah, my grandfather, he was from Cuba, and he came over to the United States. And first, he was in New York. He was in Harlem, and so many of the people there in Harlem were actually from Jacksonville, and that was his connection here. So he moved here into LaVilla. That was in 1927. And opened up our tailor shop there, Mariano P. Mendez Cuban tailor in the Masonic Temple.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Which is still there.
Yes. And so our house that's down there, it's on Monroe Street. It's the only home that's in existence, that's livable, electricity, everything is in there. It's on Monroe Street, and it was designed by Cluto.
Okay,
So,
Henry
yeah.
Clutho. So
Yes.
the same person that designed the Masonic Temple and,
Yes.
and a number of other iconic buildings around
Yes.
Jacksonville. Yeah. And so how important is it for you and kind of just your family and the history that you have in LaVilla to have this park there, sort of highlighting this period, and also two of the most famous residents of LaVilla, the Johnson brothers?
Yeah. It's very important to keep the legacy of that area because it was totally destroyed with the urban renewal. So
Yeah.
it's important to have that there. And the neighborhood is now being revitalized. So
And for a long time, as we said, this park was sort of designated. There was a plaque there, but there was nothing else for a number of years. It was just a grassy lot, sometimes even just being used for overflow parking at the Prime Osborne, but it wasn't really given any attention. And so I'm not sure who wants to take this question, but in terms of providing activities at the park, making sure that there's something to do, that there are people using that park, I'm just curious how important that is, how important that was in, the vision for creating the Lift Every Voice and Sing Park.
I'll
Lloyd?
let Mr. Lloyd start because he talks to the crowd about that a lot, how important it is to have people there enjoying the space.
The activation was one thing to build the park. One thing we were glad to see that it was done. But then activation of a park is a whole different situation. You have for a long time, people didn't even know the park existed. So now we're activated. We have a lot of activities going on to it. We partnered with the Emerald Trail, and that helps bring people to the park. So we're glad that things are starting to move forward. The main thing is people know the park exists.
yes.
Right. And so this is, as you said, it's along the kind of Emerald Trail at the Lee Street area of the Emerald Trail. And the cross streets downtown for it are like Adams Street
Adams
Yes.
and Forsyth.
and Forsyth. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. And so if people haven't been, it's got a sculpture that kind of creates a raised lawn. But tell us a little bit about, and I do want to get to kind of specific programming maybe after the break, but in terms of generally the kinds of things that, are going to be appealing to people, overall, the messaging, overall, the kind of cultural stuff that you want to offer there.
Yes, well, that's where the Vibrant Places Collective comes in. And it's a fund that's budgeted to pay programmers to come out to the park. And so we were very intentional. Aaron and myself worked on the historical markers at the park. Mr. Lloyd was part of a committee that was giving us the history to make sure it went into the markers. And Mariano I'd known for a very long time just as a creative and didn't realize the history of his family. So through the research, he had reached out and said, hey, you should do a story on my family. And then I reached back out to him and was like, hey, you need to join this committee. And then we formed a collective of 8 people who have some connection to the park, LaVilla, or the song. And so we all vote each month on what programming we want to see, the amount of dollars that goes towards those programmers. And it's been amazing. It's been a blessing. There's so many people that feel connected to the park because of the history already. They want to be involved. Some people have said it feels like a family reunion going there, and I think that's what we want. We want to revive what the history was, what the brothers would have envisioned through the song. We want to call that back to the space.
And it is interesting kind of reaching back through time, especially when young people like yourself are taking the lead on uncovering and preserving and celebrating this history. And, it's only kind of in recent years, too, that the Black national anthem has become kind of a national anthem, something that you hear at events that are not just exclusively things attended to or familiar, within the Black community.
Right. And it's it's pretty amazing to be in the part. We were just talking about it before, knowing that this was the home site of the Johnson brothers, and we have this sort of like slope park, and just to watch like little Black boys kind of roll down the park, really kind of like brings it all together for me. Like that could have been them. So it's really just we've created a safe space, I think, for people to gather, for people to be themselves, and it's at all times it's going to be a park for everybody, but it does have that feeling of that family reunion.
Well, we're going to have to take just a short break. We are talking about the James Weldon Johnson and John Rosamond Johnson Tribute Park, Lift Every Voice and Sing, in downtown Jacksonville. We'll be back in just a minute.
Congaree & Penn, dedicated to agriculture and culinary endeavors, offering field-to-fork dining and outdoor experiences on over 300 acres. Sip, dine, explore. Information at congareeandpenn.com. Museum of Science and History's new exhibition, Mosh Archives, the story of us and you, steps you into a treasure trove of memories, now through August 31st. Tickets and information at themosh.org.
On the next Fresh Air, author and poet Layla Motley. She earned critical acclaim a few years ago at just 19 for her debut novel, Nightcrawling. Now she's back with a new novel that follows 3 young women as they navigate pregnancy and what it means to be a mother in a post-Roe v. Wade world. I hope you can join us.
Today at noon on WJCT News 89.9.
AI is changing lives for the better. For people with disabilities, artificial intelligence tools are helping them see, hear, experience, and move through the world in profound new ways.
We can all relate to that particular thing, which is to want to do something, to want to feel included and a part of, to want to feel connected and respected.
AI and assistive technology, that's on the next On Point.
Today at 11, here on WJCT News 89.9.
Quality information is getting harder to come by these days.
The crisis in local news is bigger than you think.
55 million people live in communities with limited or no access to local news, a reliable source of information about their communities. But what can we do about it? We bring you a conversation on solutions from the Aspen Ideas Festival, next time on 1A.
Today, starting at 10 on WJCT News 89.9.
Welcome back. If you're just joining us, we're talking to 4 folks who are central in the planning and programming at Lift Every Voice and Sing Park in LaVilla, specifically Lloyd Washington, Aaron Kendrick, Carla Michelle Jones, and Mariano Mendez. Glad to have you all back here with us. So one of the things that is involved in the programming here is not only making it accessible, but also trying to reinforce some kind of community goals, health and wellness. And I wonder if you could kind of talk about integrating that into what is also a lineup of entertainment and art and culture and history.
Yes, we kind of looked at what are some events that are naturally occurring in the community, and people who have their own branded events, and we wanted to give them a home at the park. We started with Everybody Yoga because we thought it would be pretty easy, and also we wanted to offer accessible wellness experiences that are free to the community through the Vibrant Places Collective. So we started with Everybody Yoga. We have rotating instructors that offer different types of flow. And then we have.
And when is that offered for people? Is it at a regular time every week?
Yes, every Thursday from 6 to 7. It's all free. We have
PM.
walk and hit. Yes,
Okay.
I'm sorry.
You never know with yoga
Sunset.
people. It could be
Yes,
great.
exactly. But it's beautiful. And we have a mist that comes from the other side of the lifted line that's very nice too. So that's every Thursday from 6 to 7 every p.m. Everybody Yoga. We also have Walk and Hit, which is every last Saturday, and powered by Body Precepts. These are two sisters who used to do this at the landing. They bring out a huge crowd.
And HIT is with a high intensity
Yes.
interval training or something. Okay.
Yes, I actually did it last weekend,
Right.
and I'm a yoga girl, but I was surprised that I was able to do that. But they're very motivating. They start and end at the park, but they do a 3-mile walk to Friendship Fountain and back. We also have line dancing, which we all know is super popular right now, provided by Jazzco. And they're the owners of a club that was very popular here in, I believe, the 80s.
In Arlington.
Yes. Oh, you know?
Yeah.
And so they teach those classes. That's every last Saturday as well. What am I forgetting? Sunday Fun Day Market is every third Sunday. It's family friendly, more focused on the arts and foods you can eat. The play date is PlayStations, family-friendly kids. That's when we use that hill. We have sack races, bringing back that old school bubbles, just outside play.
Yeah.
And it's for social, emotional health as well.
Mariana, I wonder if you could talk about, how you consider this park in terms of, bringing back some of the vibrancy that some of those, lost buildings and kind of lost residents cost that community. Where is LaVilla right now in your mind in terms of, its state and its sense of community?
Yeah, it's definitely making a comeback. And the park, it has an energy to it. Just when I was a little kid, that's when I was always there, like every weekend with my family. And LaVilla had an energy to it. And it's there. If you come there to the park and you've experienced the different things, that's what it's like. It was always music, lots of people, different people. So the Salvation Army is there. It's always been there. So I've always been around the people that are there. But there used to be hotels and gas stations, churches, all those things were there. And it was a certain energy that is there that was nowhere else in the city. But with that part there, and now when we do the music events and everything, that energy is back. I feel that same energy I did when I was a kid.
Aaron, do you think that the arts community is also kind of receiving that this place is there, that it's, because there are events that speak directly to, creative types like yourself?
Absolutely. I think we've been hearing this term in the city a lot, like this idea of this renaissance that's happening here. The arts and culture community has always been really active and really vocal, I think, in Jacksonville. So I think the park just gives us sort of like another hub, another place to come together and celebrate what we do. But I think, overall, as we move through the city, you'll see the footprint of the arts and culture community in a lot of different ways. I think it'll be very interesting to see how, like, the park development and then some of the homes that are being developed over there are the beginning of how it'll change in that area. And there's lots more to come when it comes to like the LaVilla Heritage Trail, things like that. So I think that energy that we've kind of like found and made happen in that park will feed into the developments that happen around it. And I think it'll really become a premier space and more artists will use it. And I think it's also a great place for people to sort of like start. Like we've had a lot of conversations with people about, hey, I have this idea for this thing. And, where it's like, bring it to us. Let us help you kind of.
And how can people bring ideas to you if they've got them?
Go to our website, levsparkjacks.com, and you can submit your ideas. And every month, the first Thursday of the month, the collective meets and decides on those events.
All right. Well, Lloyd Washington, Aaron Kendrick, Carla Michelle Jones, and Mariano Mendez, thank you so much for being here.
Thank
Absolutely.
you.
Thank you for having
All
me.
right. Thank you for listening. If you've got comments or questions, please send them to firstcoastconnect@wjct.org. And if you missed anything today, you can reach out. If you missed anything today, you can hear our rebroadcast at 8 o'clock or find our entire archive on your favorite podcast platform. Join us tomorrow when we talk about the environmental and economic costs of sewage sludge and why the St. Johns River Basin feels the most impact. I'm Ann Schindler. You've been listening to First Coast Connect on WJCT News 89.9.
Support for First Coast Connect is provided by Baptist Health and the North Florida TPO.
Museum of Science and History's new exhibition, Mosh Archives, The Story of Us and You, steps you into a treasure trove of memories, now through August 31st. Tickets and information at themosh.org. The North Florida TPO is dedicated to transportation planning, funding, clean fuels, and new technologies for a vibrant, resilient, and connected region. More information available at northfloridatpo.com. Baptist Health is a proud supporter of First Coast Connect. Baptist Health, committed to building a healthier community for all of us. More info